Welcome to A Psychologist Talks. This is going to be part 3 in a series about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. Today we're going to be tackling the development. How does this come to be? Now, spoiler alert, the short answer is we don't know. So good, right? You're done with the episode. We're going to just click next. But we know some. I mean, I'll offer at least an ideology, kind of general paths or general tendencies that might lend itself to the development of the defense and the condition. I'll do the best I can. But first, we're going to start with normal development because, spoiler alert, narcissistic defense is in all of us. And I think this is what lends itself to this path or this trajectory is it doesn't materialize out of thin air. It's already there in all of us. It's when it becomes an excess that it becomes problematic. So let's start with normal development. Well, first and foremost, synonymous with all personality development, and I'm not just talking disordered personality, just personality in general. We are relational creatures. We are born into this world with the need to relate and the need to connect with other human beings. It is how we form our identities. It's why if you rip a kid away from humanity and toss them out there somewhere, they're not really going to develop a firm sense of self and differentiation from others because there's no people to reflect this process with. There's no dance that is occurring. So we are subject to our early caregivers and early interactions and experiences because we have no defenses. We just, whatever comes our way washes over us. It's only by the age of 5 or 6 that we really start to develop a core sense of ourselves, and from that, begin to be able to differentiate from other people. We still have very primitive defenses around that time. We're either taking stuff in or we're trying to defend messily against stuff, but we're not really, there's no real complex defense system. Because we're really concrete thinkers. We're still thinking in good or bad, black and white. It's only when we get towards abstraction, and this is most solid, I would argue, ages 10 and beyond. It does start to develop 8, 9 for sure, but it really should be solid by 10, 11, 12. And this is where we get that gray. The gray starts to enter into the frame, and this is where we can really start to differentiate between self and others, put things into categories, understand, mold, adapt things, and thereby also develop a more complex defenses, almost like a screening method of things that we divert away, things that we can bring in, but we can bring them in a way that isn't just in its raw form. We can play with it more. And this is a really important skill set that we begin to learn. And it's a lifelong journey, let me be frank. If you're really being diligent and not just falling into old habits your entire life, you're always looking for ways to adapt and ways to relate to people in more effective manners and with less defenses. So it's a lifelong journey. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that we're getting rid of our primitive defenses, our black and white defenses. Narcissistic defense is one of those. Now, you might not call it that, but when I compare this devaluing process of what narcissism can do with our own innate ability to just not take in feedback, they look remarkably similar. And that's why I say it is inside all of us. Now, you might still scoff and go, oh yeah, I'm just supposed to believe you have got a narcissistic defense. Well, let me give an illustration. So let's say you're the age of 14. I mean, you could do any age, honestly. But let's say you're 14 years old and you're really good and you take a lot of pride in your performance in a sport or a subject matter, science or math or something. Or maybe you're really proud of your role as a friend. You're really giving. You're really empathic, whatever it might be. And then you get this bad feedback. You contribute to a loss of the game, or you don't convert the final play that would have put you over the line and would have led to victory. Or you get benched by a coach. Or you perform poorly in practice repeatedly for like a week or something like that. Or you fail class, you fail a major test, or you get this sort of feedback of something that you thought you had really solid, something that you thought was super rudimentary, and you got it all wrong. Or maybe a friend comes to you and says, you know what, you're not a good friend. You don't understand me. You don't even care about me, or I don't want to be your friend anymore. Oof, right? Like all these are tough nuggets of feedback to be receiving. And we could receive them. We could, and get really upset, cry, overwhelmed, whatever it might be. But you know what the other option is that's just sitting right there in front of us, waiting for us? Swat it away. No. Just, no, I will not take this in. No, get it away from me. And that is the narcissistic defense to a T. It just, because what we do is we say no, and then we just devalue it and say they don't know what they were talking about. This is a one-off that doesn't challenge my greatness whatsoever. I'm still probably the best person on the team. This friend doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. They're the ones who caused all these problems. It wasn't me. Hey, we've done this. We do this. It's right there waiting for us to protect us against something that hurts us. It hurts our pride. It hurts our self-esteem in that moment. And it's tough to take in. So swat it away. Now you might then be saying to yourself, okay, so are we all narcissists? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. There's a normal range here that differentiates us from the pathological. And I'll try my best to give you an example or sort of a very subjective litmus test for this. Now, understand this litmus test, if you apply it to yourself, that's all well and good, but you might want to ask people who know you best how you do, because you might be a little bit biased. So let's say we've got this narcissistic defense, and then we have 10 instances of really challenging feedback. Something that just cuts us to the core, not like something real light, but something, boom, really hits us hard. It's like, oh, it hits our pride. Well, we're going to talk about frequency versus flexibility here. So if we're in the normal range and we're just employing our typical narcissistic defense that we all have inside of us, frequency-wise, maybe we employ it once out of those 10, maybe twice, maybe 3 times out of these 10. I mean, heck, maybe even 4, or in a really bad week or bad month or something, maybe we get towards 5, 50-50. But notice we're not exceeding 50-50. It's not like it's the majority of our responses when we're getting some sort of feedback from the world around us. So that's marker 1. However, it's interdependent with marker number 2. Marker number 2 is flexibility. So what I mean by flexibility, it's the ability to hold that feedback and loop back around with it or play with it. Now note, this isn't like an immediate need. Because I don't know about y'all, I've received some challenging feedback and I'm just like, no, I don't think so, right? But then if it's somebody who I respect or I love and I really care about, it could be minutes or it could be hours later and I'm like, oh shit, right? Excuse my French. Oh, they don't want to hurt me. They were brave enough to tell me something. And I just kind of swatted it away a little bit like a jerk. And so there's probably something here I need to play with. There's something I need to take in. I don't need to take in all of it, right? But there's something I need to take in. And genuinely, I mean, authentically, not like I'm going to play a part and act as though I'm considering this feedback. No, seriously, self-evaluating and saying, this is incongruent with me and what I would like to be, but I need to consider it. But let's say it's not even a loved one. Maybe they just got feedback at work or something like that. And, maybe a week later, it's still nagging at us or it comes back to mind and we're like, oh gosh, what am I doing with this? What am I going to do with this feedback? I'm not sure. I feel like there's something there. I don't like this piece and I don't think that's correct, but I don't know about this. And there's other times where we might receive feedback and we just... No, they don't know what they're talking about. But then a year later, we hear something really similar. And all of a sudden, this thing that we had forgotten about years ago, it's like, oh, that sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard this before. And all of a sudden, the file drawer just opens and pops out. And you're like, oh, damn it. There it is again. And we're like, okay, now I got to figure out what to do this because it wasn't just 1, it wasn't 2. Now I'm here a 3rd time or here in a 4th time. Like, shoot, there's a pattern here, and I need to look at this again. And so latent to all of what I'm saying here is you'll notice there's this vulnerability. There's this humility to actually hold something long enough to reapproach it, even if it's at delay. Narcissistic defense does not typically allow for this, not frequently. The neurotic folks maybe once in a while, but by and large they're not going to revisit because they take feedback and they're like, oh, this is the feedback, and they light it on fire. They don't file it away in the files, or off the ashes go. They're like, see ya, right? They don't really incorporate. Now psychologically they're storing some of it. Let me be very clear, but it's not conscious to them anymore. But they don't take in that feedback. They have no interest in looping back around with this feedback. Never mind they'll be employing the defense very frequently, more than 50% of the time, when they are challenged. Remember, this isn't just like light stuff, but when they're challenged at the core, they're like, nope, not going to do it. And it's going to be their primary mode of defense. So that is like the normal range versus treading into the abnormal range. Neurotic folks are a little bit trickier because they will play that middle ground, like I was just alluding to. Maybe they can loop back every once in a while. Or it's frequent, but it's not like 100% of the time. So maybe they're 50% all the time. But that 50%, because we're very giving and empathic people, we were like, well, maybe they just have a hard time, right? We kind of give them passes. And then, but you really hold them to the fire, and all of a sudden it gets to 75%, right? It gets a little bit more problematic. But loved ones will eventually catch on to this and kind of send them to treatment if they're not self-guiding, because they're like, I don't know about this. Like, we have a good relationship. We're really connected in a lot of ways, but when I try to like offer something constructive, it's like you just don't hear me and you just don't want to grow in this. Like, so you need to get some help, because I can't keep doing this. I need some professional help to help you, basically. Or they might self-identify. The really high-functioning ones will be like, I keep getting this negative feedback from maybe I've had a few breakups and I just can't figure it out. And I'm getting nervous now because I don't want this to keep happening, because this is too much of an insult to my ego. Now, they don't frame it that way, but that's what can lend them to come in for help. So, all right, so that doesn't answer the question of development per se. It just gives you kind of a general sense of normal range versus abnormal range. But it is basic math. Like, the more frequent it's used and the more pervasive the defense is, the more likely the narcissistic personality disorder is. Now, the collision of nature and nurture is, at the end of the day, what we talk about when it comes to personality development and abnormal personality development. On the nature side, it's temperament. Temperament is an aspect of inheritance, but also this sort of interesting uniqueness within our genetics that shapes our early personalities and continues to influence our personalities as we develop. An easy way to describe this is something experiential. Say you've met a 1-year-old before, and then you go meet a different 1-year-old. Why are those kids different? I mean, sometimes they're the same, right? They're very similar, but more often than not, they have their individual quirks. That's temperament at play, because parents aren't that powerful. They can't shape a kid that much by the age of 1. The one exception is if they're pulled away from a caregiver, they can develop serious attachment problems. But outside of that, it's temperament is ruling the roost here. It is absolutely pushing this kid forward. So the way I describe temperament, at least through the lens of personality development and atypical personality development, it's through this idea of sensitivity. Think of sensitivity as like biological reactivity to the world around them. So there's this tendency for any emotion, any affect, any situation around them, it just lights them up. It lights a kid up because they're just absolutely attending to their environment. The low sensitivity is a lack of activation. Now, this is a continuum, let me be clear, but the low activation is just like, yeah, I see it, but it's not, there's no fires that are going off inside of this kid. And pathology will often develop, aspects of pathology will often develop out of that heightened sensitivity, because it's just a constant barrage of information, right? Where you have to develop these screens. And when you combine, getting to point 2 of nurture, the environment, like what happens when you're highly sensitive and boom, you're getting barraged all the time with not so good stuff around you, right? So the high sensitivity, though, does have it. There is a benefit to it. These individuals often are wonderful at empathy. They're very caring, very nurturing, highly observant individuals, but in excess can lead to overwhelm, depression, anxiety, all this sort of stuff. The low activation has its own problems. You talk about, like, good, they can differentiate from self and others and not be overwhelmed by things. But at the same time, too much of that can lend itself to apathy and low empathy and just, like, not really caring too much. Now, there is some theorists out there that argue it's not necessarily a lack of sensitivity. It's a movement towards something positive and approaching temperament. The idea here is it's kind of dopamine seeking, which is good because interactions between people hits our dopamine system. Like, it's good. Oh, we laugh together, we cry together. There's closeness. This is a important aspect of relating, but an excess can lead to impulsivity, or almost like an addiction like framework where it's all about my needs above everything else. And so it's not necessarily just a lack of sensitivity. It can be an over presence of this need seeking. So that can contribute to things as well. Let's put a pin in that and then go over to the environment, though. Now, this is relatively intuitive as well. People, often over-correlate trauma with personality development, but does it affect? Oh, absolutely. It absolutely does affect the development of personality. Withholding environments are really challenging for kids because it's just like, I'm not good enough to receive love, or if it's neglectful, or if it's caustic and abusive, or just negative, and they're just always kind of hitting it shame based, like you're not measuring up. That just, it just tears a kid apart because they're less like, I must be bad. There must be this greater good thing out there that I'm just not measuring up to. Or if there's this high performance, it's not about emotion, it's not about relating, it's about perfection, it's about achievement, it's about like at all costs. It just messes with kids' psyches where they're like, I don't like, there's discrepancies there, and it just tears a kid apart. Very sad. I want to be clear. This is about, we talk about like frequency and flexibility. We're talking about this is their day to day. This is what they're predominantly experiencing, because we are good enough parents. This is borrowing from Winnicott's Good Enough Mother. Like, we don't have to be perfect. We don't need to be on top of our game, always loving all the time. Kids are highly resilient. We can mess up here and there, be dismissive and stuff as a parent here and there. But if it's not the dominant experience, most kids are okay. A little exception to that is if the genetics are extremely strong and the sensitivity levels are out of control. You might, if you're hitting at like 50-50 as a parent, that sensitivity might take that 50% that ain't so good and inflame that quite a bit. So while you might be good enough with a kid without those sensitivities, for a kid with sensitivities, it's going to be a problem, more of a problem for them. Now, what's interesting, theorists also talk about, there could be, with narcissism in particular, there could be this heightened indulgence and a permissive parenting. So not just like bad, negative perfectionism, but a parent that's just like, I don't know, I'm not going to give you any limitations, and I'm going to give you whatever you want. And that's going to be how I parent, just kind of indulging all the time and just giving you tons of space to do whatever the heck you want. So that could be a problem too. So again, we've got temperament, which has this anxious, insecure, oh my gosh, heightened sensitivity. And then we've got possibly also one that's just need seeking and dopamine seeking. On the parenting side, very similar, we have parenting peer interactions too. Let me be clear, lots of peer interactions can shape this too. But lots of things that tend to anxiety and questioning self-esteem, or possibly permissive and indulgent parenting. So how does this translate into narcissism? Well, maybe it depends on the subtype. There are some arguments that say when you have this sort of need focus, this desire to feel good, I need to feel good, I don't like the way that I feel, mixed with anxiety, that maybe you develop into a covert. Covert narcissism is more likely. I should note that, forgive me, I don't have the name of the researchers on hand here, but I think the beginning of the title is like how narcissists bloom or something. I think it's like a 2009 article. I'll cite it in the comments. There's some cool stuff I'm deriving from them I found really helpful and conducive for this episode. And then they argue, well, then you have this approaching temperament mixed with this indulgence, and maybe that lends itself to an arrogant and entitled type. Because when you interview folks who are more arrogant and entitled, they'll talk about their backgrounds being all peach keen and things are great and they get what they want. And then you interview folks who are more covert, there's lots of insecurity and uncertainty in there. Well, yeah, but to me, that's not always the case. I actually see the reverse happening too. So on the covert side, or let's take it from the insecurity, anxious temperament side, it's really interesting to interview and hear a bunch of anxiety, like legitimate tumultuous upbringing. And then at some point they reach this threshold where they're like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I cannot tolerate this. I cannot tolerate me feeling inadequate. And they will flip the switch and go to staunch arrogance. Staunch arrogance. And that breaks that mold, that there is absolutely insecurity going on. And then there's an interesting vice versa too, that you can have a highly indulgent upbringing, but maybe there's interactions around you. It's self-indulgence mixed with, an environment that doesn't really challenge you too much, and you get lots of indulgence. I've also seen, I see more the covert going to arrogance, the insecurity over to arrogance. But it's interesting because I think as social norms are challenged, there is a gender component to this. But say there's a lot more challenge around arrogance in men, like that's not as allowed. Well, defenses don't just like crumble when they're caught. It's like, oh, you got me. And then the narcissistic defense just disappears. It's not how that works. It is nimble. It will work to preserve itself. And so if arrogance becomes disallowed or it's not socially sanctioned, at some point that negative feedback is more than the narcissistic defense can manage and says, okay, I need to be more covert with this thing that seems to be soliciting negative feedback. And it's often the arrogance. And so they will adapt and learn and move and shift another way and say, okay, I need to hide this a little bit better because I am great, but I want to stop hearing about this BS saying that I'm like so bad and I'm, always in people's faces, whatever. Well, I'm just going to hide it better. Now, perhaps these crossover cases just aren't terribly good at it, right? Like maybe their shelf life isn't quite as long than if that was always their way of operating. I don't know of any research on this. I do wonder about like this sort of idea of prognosis. Although anecdotally, when I see people with really injured childhoods and they move towards arrogance, they can be in their 50s and they haven't moved yet, not significantly. So even if that's true, I'm not talking like a 5-year period. It's just a wondering of mine. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is there's a collision between nature and nurture, temperament and socialization, and the use of defenses that they've either learned or they just begin to over-rely on because it's productive for them. It lends itself to a positive outcome that they want. Those things collide, and with enough frequency and reinforcement, narcissistic personality disorder results. But what's so maddening about this is you can take a somewhat similar situation and other personality issues can result too. And I think this is what's so challenging, why I don't think I'm like offering a ton of insight here besides just the general understanding of personality development is we just don't know. Maybe there's beauty in it. That's the beauty. That there's a wild world of how things interrelate and get us to the present day. So what would I end with? What would I offer? And this is mostly to providers, I would think. But what I say is defenses exist in the context of narratives. And I know I'm a process guy, I'm a relational psychodynamic guy, and so maybe this doesn't necessarily jive with your approach. But to me, I'm always interested in the narrative behind the defense. And this is treading a little bit towards treatment, so my apologies, which I think is going to be the next episode. But, even if I'm working pretty staunchly in the here and now with a personality-related issue, because it's very destructive in the here and now, I'm still interested and intrigued in understanding how this defense developed. Because I will tell you, if I hear somebody who there's always been an undercurrent and there hasn't been a lot of environmental contextual factors lending itself to the development of the defense, that is very different to me than when I see a lot of tumultuous experiences, lots of kind of backs and forth and a struggle that eventually resulted in the emergence of this dominant defense. Those are two very different people to me. One, I think, the former, lends itself a little bit more towards biology temperament, that there is something genetic that is very much driving this. Unless, again, there is just pure entitlement all the time, and I haven't really met too many of those, but, I'd leave that open for possibility. But when there's a lot of kind of back and forth, there's a lot of environmental variables, that pulls up environment to at least compete with genetics. And I think like, okay, this might be more workable space. I don't mean to make that sound really bad about the genetic stuff, but you look across any conditions when symptoms arise early and quite pervasively and they never really change, prognosis is typically poorer. Like, you're not going to make as many foundational changes as you could when the defense kind of fights a little bit and the other parts of self states kind of lose out to this more pathological defense. That to me is a little bit more workable and maybe a little bit more insight driven work. But again, I'm treading into treatment stuff, but I just like to conceptualize. Like, I'm not going to give it a definitive number. That's silly. But like, am I leaning this is more genetic? Am I leaning this is more environment? Or is there kind of a mix here? Because that's going to change my conceptualization and it's going to change treatment ultimately. So I don't know if that's terribly helpful. I don't know if any of this has been terribly helpful from at least from like a provider point of view. I hope it's at least interesting to be exposed to at least what I understand is out there in the field about how personality develops and maybe how personality develops, and then maybe some correlates closer to narcissism. At the end of the day, this insecurity of some sort with some sort of entitlement, some sort of need, I'm aggrieved, not aggrieved. I'm missing something, and I want to get that something. That kind of mixture with negative experiences or teaching and modeling in unhealthy ways might lend itself to a narcissistic trajectory, but not all the time. Not all the time. So again, I hope this is interesting. Thank you for sticking with me on this. Future episodes are going to be talking about treatment and social correlates to some degree, so stick around for that. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and as always, stay curious.